All right, y'all go ahead and open to James chapter 1. We started last week on talking about verses 9, 10, 11. We talked about poor Christians and how James said that they should rejoice in their exaltation. Y'all remember all that? Anybody? Anybody want to expound on any of that? And you know, when you read through here, everything that we've covered so far in the book of James, this just kind of, it's almost like it doesn't fit. You know, James talking about boom, 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 and then all of a sudden he talks about rich Christians and poor Christians. Well, there's a reason for that, and you'll understand it once we get past this right here, and I plan on doing that today. We're going to talk about the rich Christian. Thank you, sir. So let's read verses 9 through 11. Excuse me. Look what he says. He says, "Let the lowly brother glory in his exaltation, but the rich in his humiliation. Because as a flower of the field he will pass away. For no sooner has the sun risen with the burning heat that it withers the grass. Its flowers falls, and its beautiful appearance perishes. So the rich man also will fade away in his pursuits." Now, when you first read that, you're probably thinking, well, he's talking about how rich people are different than the poor people, and rich people are looked at in the Bible as bad people, but that's not true. And he's going to show you exactly what he's talking about. Again, he said, look at again in verse 9. He says, "Let the lowly brother glory in his exaltation, but the rich in his humiliation." So you got the rich Christian, you got the poor Christian. He says that to the poor Christians, rejoice in your exaltation, and they're being raised to a higher status. Remember why? Because now they have experienced salvation in Jesus. They've been brought into the family of God, and those were the true riches. Then he says to the rich Christians that they're to rejoice in their humiliation. And that word humiliation means to be brought to a lower position. So to one he says you've been brought up. To the other says that you are up and you need to come down. So in other words, the poor Christians are to rejoice because in Jesus they've come from poverty to riches. But when it comes to the rich Christians, they're to rejoice because they've been brought to a lower position, a lower status. Now, how well do you think that's set with these rich Christians? I mean, you ever know anybody who's got a lot of riches and you tell them how you need to lower yourself? And then James goes on to say to the rich Christian, he explains, he says, "But as a flower of the field, he will pass away, for no sooner is the sun risen in the burning heat that it withers away, or withers the grass, and the flower falls, and its beautiful appearance perishes. So the rich man also will fade away in his pursuits." So it all lies in that word, pursuits. Remember, there's always key words in Scripture. In verses of Scripture. And there it is that word pursuits. If you want to understand what he's talking about, when he's talking about rich people, it's the word pursuits. So St. James says to the rich Christian, he says, you just rejoice because you have been lowered. Your position has been reduced, and because you're going to pass away just like the flower of the field. Now, that doesn't seem like anything to rejoice and be happy about, does it? So why are the rich Christians, why are they to rejoice about these things? Anybody? Humbly. What he's actually saying, he says, you know what? In spite of your riches, you have still come to know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. In spite of you being rich and thinking you have everything that you might need in life, that you don't need Jesus, you have come to know Jesus in spite of all that. And I'm going to tell you, that's something that a lot of rich people don't find. They don't. Notice that James doesn't say they should give up their riches, though, now does he? That's not what he's saying. I've actually heard preachers and Bible teachers say that's what James is saying. Nowhere does he say that in order to have Jesus, you've got to give up all your riches. No. So what's he talking about? He's telling them, hey, make sure that you put what you have, your riches, your material things, in the right place. It's all about priority. They got to see their money and their possessions for what they really are, and have a proper perspective of that. And I'm going to tell you, we are all in this room today considered rich people, monetarily. If we did a worldwide census on it, an opinion, we're rich. Y'all realize that? Y'all realize that over there? Cole, you're rich. You compare it to a lot of people. Matter of fact, we're rich compared to a lot of people right here in this community, aren't we? Us right here, we have probably more than most of the people who live around us. That's how blessed we've been. Now, what controls your life? Really? What's your priority? Where does it lie? So that's the point James is trying to make. And listen, it's not wrong to have money. So don't think that it's wrong to have money. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that God says that it's a sin for us to have things and to be rich or a lot of material things. But, riches and material things, they do become sinful at times in our lives. They really do. And it's when those things are not placed in their proper place in our lives. I'm going to read you Proverbs 30, verse 7, 8, and 9. Now, y'all probably don't know who Agur was. He was actually a believing Hebrew. This is what he wrote in Proverbs. He says, 2 things I request of you. He's talking to God. Deprive me not before I die. Remove falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food allotted to me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God. So he says, God, there are 2 things that I would like to have before I die. The first thing is in verse 8 where he says, remove falsehood and lies far from me. That's one thing that he wanted. The second thing that he wanted was also found here in verse 8 where he says, give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food allotted to me. Now, why didn't he want to have riches? Well, he says there in verse 9, he says, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Can y'all see what he's saying? Look at it. Here was a man, guys, who, he didn't desire to be rich, nor did he desire to be poor. He just wanted as much as God wanted him to have. That's all he wanted. Here's a guy who understood that God knew what was best for him. You know what I believe? I'll just go ahead and tell you. I believe that most of us are when it comes to money and material things, is we have as much of those things as God can trust us with. That's what I believe. I really do. It's an amazing thing what prosperity can do to a lot of people. I believe that's true about most of us, that God gives us what He can trust us with. Because you see, many times rich people or people who have so much, they have the tendency to trust more in their riches than they do, and they get prideful about those things. And what do we see happen? They turn their back on God. You see, riches and all these different things and being prosperous, nothing wrong with it, but many times people have a tendency to replace God with those, or replace those things with God. I have seen this happen so many times in people's lives. I mean, they begin to prosper, and the first thing you see, man, they stop serving the Lord. You know why? Because we get to thinking that we don't need God as much as we did at one time. That's why you see so many poor people. You think about it, the poor people that are a lot more faithful to God than the wealthy people. Is that not true? I mean, overall. I mean, there's the people who don't have the money to for all kinds of different pleasures that they would like. They don't have the money for other activities, and they're more focused on God. That was true in the Bible. I mean, who did Jesus spend most of his time with? Who? With the poor. Now, were they hanging around him? Were they following him? Yeah. I mean, Zacchaeus is a good example. He was a rich man. Jesus had to go to his house. Now, he wanted to see who Jesus was. But all these, it's still the same way today. I told y'all a couple of weeks ago about the widow's mite. Y'all remember that? That little old poor widow, she gave more than all the rich people did because she gave of herself. She gave more than she had to give or she could afford to give. It's just still the same way today. It's just something about all these material things. Listen, you can have all these things as long as they don't take the place of God. And many times we get our priorities out of whack, and that's when James said, hey, you need to lower yourselves. You need to put all your things in the proper place, have a proper perspective than that. And again, guys, don't walk out here saying, well, Brother Chris said it's wrong for us to have things and be rich. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that at all. James is actually giving us a warning about the dangers of riches, is what he's doing. He says again in verse 10, he says, because as a flower of the field, he will pass away. So here James, he uses the illustration of a flower to teach us about the dangers of all these different kinds of riches. He's very illustrative all throughout the book of James. So where's the danger here? In what way are riches a danger, by the way James puts it? Well, he says that riches are just like a beautiful flower that grows out in nature. You know, we're living in a day when people, they place so much faith and time and effort on money and material things and entertainments and activities. And James lets us know that just how dangerous those things truly are. So why are they so dangerous? Yeah. Well, for one thing, they're very desirable. They are. Every once in a while I get an itch to get a new pickup. I use the excuse, well, I ain't bought a new truck since 2018. I got 53,000 miles on my truck. Bought it brand new in 2018. Nothing wrong with it. Oh, I shouldn't say that, but nothing wrong. What do I need a new vehicle for? Every once in a while, because I desire them, because I see them new ones, I'm like, man, I gotta give me one of them. Or somebody will call you, Mr. Van Allen, it's time for you to have a new truck. They did that for a long time, trying to get me to buy a new pickup. And, you're missing out on the deal of a lifetime. Until I told them what my deal of a lifetime was, they ain't called me back. But what good was that thing going to do me? And James talks about flowers. You ladies, y'all love flowers? Colleen, you like flowers? Matt, ever seen you flowers? Yeah, I do. Actually, I do too. I like to grow anything, but I'm right there with you, man. Does she take care of them after she gets them all up and growing? Yeah, that's my problem too. That's my problem too. Just more for me to do. let's say somebody sends you a bouquet of flowers, and they're so pretty, they smell so good. And let's fast forward about 4 or 5 days down the road. What do they look like then? Yeah, they start drooping. The petals begin to fall off. Now, when you first got them, you thought it was the cat's meow. Boy, I thought, man, I got the best husband. He sent me such a beautiful flowers. They smell so good. About 4 days down the road, them things stink to high heaven. I need to throw them. What do you end up doing with them? Throw them away. James says that's the way the riches are. That's what happens. And it's just like buying a new vehicle. What's going to happen to a vehicle? What's going to happen? Sooner or later, they're going to break down. They're going to get scratches. They're not going to be as pretty as it was the day you bought them. You ain't going to see it that way either. And you'll be sitting there thinking, why did I spend this money on this vehicle? So he uses that flower as a great illustration, and then how we walk by. You ever notice how you see a real pretty flower out somewhere? What's the first thing you want to do with that flower? Smell it. Pick it. You want it. You want to have it, don't you? Take it. You see how riches are that way too? How they look so good. They look so, oh man, I got to have that. You ever go into a department store and you see something so pretty, that's the first thing you do. I got to touch it. Then I got to try it on. If it's closed, I guess. And I got to have it. That's the way. He says, man. That's exactly the way these riches. That's what they are. They're very desirable. We see it. We got to have it. And then again, he says, where am I at? Right there on my verses. Paul, he warned us about the desire for money and riches. And 1 Timothy 6, 9 and 10. Did I put that in your notes? Look at that right quick. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare. Look at that right there. Just right there. Those who desire riches, what's the first thing that happens to them? Well, they fall in, first of all, temptation. Temptation comes, they give in to the temptation. Now what? Now they're in a trap, they're in a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts which drown men in destruction and perdition. That sounds like a pretty sad life, doesn't it? A sad life. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. What does he say about the person who desires to have riches? First of all, they're going to destroy their lives, and what else was it? They're going to stray from the faith. That means they're just going to turn their back on God. He says, those who desire to be rich. Not those who are rich or those who become rich, but those who have a desire to be rich. That's all they live for, is to have more and more and more and more. They're never satisfied. They see something pretty over here. They desire it. They got to have it. That's their goal in life. They just end up turning their back on God and destroying their lives. Have you ever noticed how we have this tendency or desire to have more, and we get to believing that, if I just had a little bit more money, a little bit more of this or that, and then we get it. Have you ever noticed how many times there are some new problems that show up in our life when we get it? Think about it. Or all of a sudden, things that we were never tempted with, now we're tempted with. Now those things are creating more problems in our lives, all because I had such a desire to have more. You ever watch any of these documentaries about rich people or They work and they work and they work and they work to get what they need, and it ends up destroying their family. Broken marriages, kids that have no kind of training whatsoever. And they end up living devastated lives. All because somebody had a desire to have more than what God wanted them to have. It wasn't like the old boy over in Proverbs said, God, I don't desire to be rich or poor. I just want what you want me to have. For some reason, we're not like that. Riches are also, they'll lie to you. They are. They're very deceiving. 1 Timothy 6:17 says, command those who are rich in this present age not to be haughty, nor to trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God, who gives us richly all things to enjoy. In other words, if we're not careful, what we have and our desire to have more will confuse us on what real security is in life. I mean, we think we get the idea that those things right there can meet the needs of our lives. And I'm going to tell you, we need to sit down and really examine ourselves on some of these things, because sometimes people think that just because they have some money in the bank that they can handle any problem that comes along. I don't know of any problems that money's really ever solved. Did y'all? You say, yeah, it solved this, it solved that. Money can be like a Band-Aid, but it's not a problem solver. It's just not. That's not real security. And another reason why riches are so deceiving is because we get the idea that these material things are more important than spiritual things. Now, guys, don't get me wrong here. Again, there's nothing wrong with material things. Nothing at all. But don't ever let material things become before spiritual things. We got to be very careful of that. We got to be very careful that we teach our children not to do that as well. Just don't ever get to the place where you desire and we become more interested in entertainments or our possessions and we neglect spiritual things. It can happen so fast. Is there anything that any of you ever struggle with some of these things? Anybody ever struggle with any of these things? We got 3 truth tellers in here. I'll be the 4th one. Yes, I do. Every one of you do. And that's why it's so important we see it where it's at in our lives. I mean, we're going to struggle with these things at times. Here's the thing. We can be millionaires one day and broke the next. How many of y'all know your history and you know something that happened in 1929 to our country? Anybody know? The stock market crashed. Have y'all ever really researched that and see what happened? Not why it happened, but the results of it.
It led to the Great Depression.
It led to the Great Depression, yes. Everybody got scared and sold. Anybody else?
People became closer to God during that time. I would guess. I wasn't there, but usually when we need Him, we get closer to Him. But it was hard times. I've heard my grandparents say.
What did a great majority of the rich people do? You know what they did? They killed themselves. They killed themselves. Jumping out of windows, hanging themselves, shooting themselves. Now, what did the great majority of the poor people do? You said it.
Got closer to God.
You see how priorities were mixed up? Go and research that. Just look at what they did. What do you think would happen today if it happened again? You take somebody who's a millionaire or a billionaire, and one day they have all this money, next thing they have nothing. It's just like that flower. One day it's all pretty, next day it's dead. That's what they think their true security really is. You pull the rug out from underneath their feet, now they're naked. They have no security in their mind. They have no hope now because all their hope was in what they had. Don't you think they'd be jumping out of windows like they were back then and hanging themselves? Yep. Can I ask you this? What would you do? Tyler, what would you do if somebody took your home, your vehicles, everything? You had nothing. Could you go on? Yes, I got 5 kids. Are they going to leave them? But it's tough, isn't it? It's all about where our priorities lie. Do you realize that could happen at any time? It really, really can. I'm thinking about all these people just here in Arkansas lately that many of them lost everything. Yeah, we've seen a lot of that over the last year, hadn't we? People losing their homes, they lose their livelihood, they lose all their possessions. And I've asked you this before, what if it happened to you? Well, how would you handle it? Well, I tell you, we're going to handle it according to where our priorities lie. If that's what we live for, then we're not going to want to live anymore. And like I say, you just never know when it might happen. And like Brother Joe said a while ago, riches are temporary. They really are. He says in verse 11, for no sooner has the sun risen with a burning heat that it withers the grass, its flowers falls, and its beautiful appearance perishes. That's just a picture of a beautiful flower, and all of a sudden one day the petals on it begin to fall off one by one. And that's present tense right there too. I think I put that in your notes that it's present tense, didn't I? Flower falls, appearance perishes. That's all present tense. You know, where James was at, in that part of the world over in Jerusalem and over in there, they have what's called a sirocco. That's what it's at, a sirocco, which is it's an east wind that blows through there. And y'all have seen pictures of it. Maybe one day, if y'all get together, y'all want to take up a love offering, y'all can send your pastor over there, and I'll take pictures for you, what it all looks like. Okay? It's okay to do that. It's this east wind that blows, and man, it's hot. It's a hot, hot wind. And believe it or not, there are all kinds of roses and flowers over there in Israel, especially around Jericho and places like that. But that east wind would blow so hard, the sun beats down on those flowers, and they begin to wither and die. Not from the root, but the petals and the flower itself gets so hot that it just burns up. And God says that's exactly the way that riches and material things are. It would be so hard, they're blowing off that hot desert, and you could not water your flowers during the day, your plants. You couldn't do it. You couldn't do it while the sun was up because the water was too hot. And the water would burn them up. So you had to water everything at night. And that's kind of like that's the kind of the illustration that James is giving here, is that east wind blowing, and it gets hot, and it takes something so beautiful, and it just burns it away. It just wastes it away. He says that's exactly what riches do, and those who who have a desire for them, they're just here 1 minute and they're gone the next. So then he says in verse 11, so the rich man also will fade away in his pursuits. So here are the rich Christians. They're going where they want to go. They're living the way they want to live, living for what they have, and they're always wanting more and more of it. And yet every day they're dying. Every day is one day they're not going to have again. And when it all comes down to the end of it, everything that they live for, what's going to happen to it? Well, they're not going to have it. Brother Ryan, if you die today, are you going to take that, which I wouldn't want to take it if I could anyway, that Dodge pickup you have, could you take it with you? I wish you could, but well, heaven's for sheep, not goats. Yeah, I got you on that one. Ma'am? That's okay. That's all right. Nothing you have right now, you're going to be able to take it with you. So what is so temporary, they're not what you think they are. And yet so many times we fall for it. And it's all about where our priorities lie. And, you know, sometimes, well, I'm not going to get into all that. We ain't got time. But I hope that y'all understand what he's talking about. I hope I was able to explain it.
Sometimes, if we take what God has given us for granted and make them the priority, the things we have, He'll humble you.
Yeah.
And I find myself needing to remind myself where my priorities need to be, because if I don't, I think there's a humbling coming. I'm going to be humbled one way or another, and I think He makes sure that's a lot of times. And if we get too big for our britches, is a easy way to say it. He'll bring us back down to where we need to be.
Well, if you don't humble yourself, he'll do it. And that's called chastening. And it's something you always remember. But think about your life. Think about if there's anything that maybe that... What we do is we take God's blessings and we turn them against Him. And we can do it before we even realize it. Just remember this. Y'all have heard me say it before, and I didn't come up with it. I've just heard preachers say it before. If you want to know how rich you are, what do you do? Well, you take away everything that you have in your life, your home, your vehicles, your clothes, everything that you have. Take away all those things that money bought you, and then everything that death is going to take away from you. What do you have left? That's how rich you really are. So it's what you have in Jesus. Those are the riches that last. And that's why they're the only ones that matter. So don't waste your life living for those things, inquiring more things. Live your life by remember what Jesus says about laying up treasures in heaven? It's real. So, all right, we'll move on from there next week. Oh, to what James says.